Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Pandemic Baseball Book Club. I'm Dan Good, and I'm here with Jeff Fletcher, who's covered Major League Baseball since 1997, including 10 seasons on the Los Angeles Angels beat for the Orange County Register. Jeff is the author of the new book, Sho Time, the inside story of Shohei Ohtani and the greatest baseball season ever played. How's it going, Jeff?
Pretty good. How are you?
Doing fine, thanks. So tell me more about the book.
Shohei Ohtani had a season in 2021 that was not like any season that anybody who's alive had ever seen. I mean, even if you go back to Babe Ruth, if you're super, super old and you saw Babe Ruth was kind of a two-way player by accident. You know, did a little bit on his way from being a pitcher to a hitter. He didn't really want to be a two-way player. Shohei Ohtani came to the United States to be a two-way player. People didn't think he could do it, and he not only did it, but he was elite at pitching and hitting, which is still, incredible to think of. And somebody needed to write a book on how he did it. And I had been there for his entire Angels career, from the beginning, the only journalist here, American journalist who'd done it. So if anybody was going to write a book, it seemed like it ought to be me.
That's awesome. And I was reading too about how you initially planned on writing this a few years ago when he made his debut and then kind of put it on hold for a while. How did that process play out, and how did you come back to it?
Well, I'd never written a book before, and I was, wouldn't really have just come up with it on my own, but a publishing company came to me right at the beginning of the 2018 season when Ohtani kind of made his splash as a rookie and said, "Hey, would you like to write a story on Ohtani's rookie year?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'm doing it anyway for my daily job, so it would not be that big of a deal." And I got about 25% of the way through it, and he got hurt. So all of a sudden he was only going to hit. And the publishing company at the time said, "You know what, he's not a two-way star anymore, so forget it. We're not interested." They paid me a little kill fee, and that was that. They said, "Okay, we'll put it on hold and maybe we'll revisit it." Okay, that was 2018. 2019, nothing happens. 2020, nothing happens. May of 2021, Ohtani is all of a sudden a two-way player and he's great again. And that same company comes back to me and says, "Hey, let's finish the book now." There was a little bit of back and forth with them, and I ended up kind of opening it up to other publishing companies. And I found a new one that was interested in doing the book, and it got the agreement finally came like at the end of the season. Wow. So I threw it all together. I didn't throw it all together, but I wrote it very quickly in the winter after the 2021 season, and here it is.
That's fantastic. Obviously the name Babe Ruth gets thrown around a lot, and you've focused on this in the book too, but obviously that historical comparison isn't exactly the best one or the most direct one. Who do you think compares most to Shohei Ohtani from baseball history if it's not necessarily Babe Ruth?
It's probably these guys from the Negro Leagues. Bullet Rogan is a guy I do talk about in the book. I do talk about some Negro Leagues players, and they were more two-way players by design, and they were just great hitters and great pitchers. And now, granted, it's a little different situation because they got their opportunities because, the Negro League rosters were a lot smaller. So there was it was much more valuable to have a two-way player than it was in Major League Baseball. And, I think that the teams were a little more on the cutting edge, and they weren't bound to tradition as much. They were, let things experiment a little more. And so I think that's why you saw more two-way players in the Negro Leagues than in the Major Leagues. But really, that's the only comparison, because in the Major Leagues, there's nobody who's really been a two-way player like Ohtani. So that's why he's so special.
Wow. What's the most noteworthy thing you learned as you were reporting this book?
I think that it wasn't necessarily things I learned while I was reporting the book. It was things I learned while watching him, because I had sort of been reporting the book for 4 years as I was doing my day job following Ohtani. And just seeing the way his incredible talent to do these two things that we didn't really think could be done because nobody else was doing it. So when you learn that and when you see him do that, that is just incredible in itself. There's not some big revelation that you make doing research. It's just something that you're seeing every day. And as you watch it happen, it's kind of startling. You have to remind yourself every now and then. I would, as I was covering the Angels, a lot of times I would have to put on Twitter just to remind myself, yesterday's starting pitcher just hit a 450-foot home run, just to kind of remind yourself how strange this is.
Mhm.
And, that's what he does.
It's so interesting because obviously over the course of baseball history up to this point, obviously with the universal DH, this has gone away, but we see pitchers hitting and maybe they hit one home run a season, or maybe you have a Mike Hampton type of situation where somebody goes off and it's a big deal. But here you have a two-way player who's playing every day and hitting bombs. It's surreal to be able to see it and to be able to appreciate it.
Yeah. And I think that there's, that's another thing. There's not going to be other guys that are going to do this because this is really hard to do. And I think that we may see, like look at Madison Bumgarner, for example.
Mhm.
He's a pitcher. He's a pretty good hitter. He's pinch hits every now and then. If you get to the 12th inning and you run out of players, you can use Madison Bumgarner to pinch hit, or, other pitchers are good enough athletes. If you get stuck in a jam, you can put them in the outfield for an inning, and, that kind of thing is what we're talking about. Nothing is like Ohtani, though, where he is in the middle of the order and he's a pitcher and he's really good at both. He's not just like okay at one, which I think is part of the story of why there's not going to be other two-way players. Is if you're just okay at one, they're just not going to let you do it because they'll find somebody who's good at it, So you have to be better than average at both, or you're not going to get the chance.
One of the most interesting things I found from reading the book was this effort to pull him away and keep him in Japan for a couple of years, and the negotiations in the background of, if you go to America as an 18-year-old, you're only going to hit or you're going to pitch, but not both. In Japan, you'll be able to do both and continue to grow and mature. And it's interesting seeing that play out and recognize that him staying in Japan for those years helped to create the player he is today.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. No major league team would have taken him as an 18-year-old and put him in the minor leagues and had him be a two-way player. Just wouldn't have happened. And if a team would have done that, and they would have not let it go on very far before they realized, oh, he's much more advanced as a pitcher, we can get him to the big leagues faster as a pitcher, let's stop wasting time on hitting. In Japan, they were willing to do that, and he still was not as advanced as a hitter as he was as a pitcher in Japan. But over there, he was a star, and they felt, he was worth given some leash to and just letting him go. And so he was able to continue to participate at the highest level, even though he wasn't a great hitter at the beginning, because they saw the value in that. And, they knew that was the promise they made to keep him in their country. And they let it go. So I think that he got the chance to develop as a two-way player because he was in Japan, and it would not have happened if he would have come straight to the United States.
What kind of interview subject is Shohei Ohtani, and what is it like to interview him?
He's pretty tight-lipped. He's not going to give you a whole lot of anything. A lot of times we would talk to him, and then we would ask, the other Japanese media that say, is his interpreter really just kind of like dulling down what he says? And they would say, no, it's the same in Japanese. So he's very, he's got a lot of incredible talents, but I think being a colorful, entertaining speaker is not one of them. But he's not that way away from interviews, by the way. That's another thing that, around his teammates and, his friends, he's a pretty funny guy and very loose and comfortable. But I think when he stands in front of the media, he wants it to be pretty quick and straightforward and simple.
Definitely. We've obviously seen players like that too with, Mike Trout isn't known for being very colorful in interviews a lot of times. Derek Jeter over the years has been known for, brushing things off, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just something that some players are better at than others.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote the book about him being a great baseball player. So I'd prefer to he'd be a great baseball player who's not a great interview than a great interview who's not a great baseball player, because nobody would buy that book.
It's a really good point. Obviously, I would say Shohei is probably the answer to this question, but who had the biggest influence on this book?
I mean, yeah, it's got to be Shohei. Obviously, that he's the reason it exists, and it's not like you normally would not write a book about a player who basically was this early in his career. Like Mike Trout, for example. I've covered Mike Trout, and it didn't seem appropriate to write a book about Mike Trout now, because
Sure.
Mike Trout's career is still ongoing. Shohei Ohtani, although his career is still ongoing, what the season he had in 2021 is, independent of any career, is a story all by itself. So that's why, Shohei Ohtani's 21 season is the book, basically, and it's the story leading up to that. So even though his career is going to keep going and he's going to do other things and probably be another book or many books about him when it's over, this is the time to write about him now, which makes him different than other players. That's
a really good point. What are some of the lessons you learned along the way while working on this book?
Well, I'd never written a book before, and I had written a lot of, I'm a daily newspaper news outlet journalist, and you write things in a different way when you're writing, little tidbits like that or little nuggets. So I think I really had to learn how to take a narrative and, stretch it out. And that was a very interesting thing. You never know, with the audience exactly too, for a book is different. And you kind of have to learn as you go, how far do I go off on this tangent, and how far do I have to explain to people what this means and that. And so it was all very eye-opening. I don't know if I did it right. I guess we'll find out when it comes out, and we'll see what people say. But there was definitely a lot of learning about how to write a book that went on during this.
You talked earlier about a really short timeline to be able to bring this together when the book was, in place, and, there was a contract in place and everything was set up. How did you go about writing and approaching that writing process?
Well, fortunately, there was a baseball lockout going on in December, so that kind of cleared my calendar, so to speak. So I had a lot of time to just sit down, and I knew the basic story before I started. So that's different from somebody else who's researching a whole book from scratch, where you have to kind of do all the research and then figure it out. I was able to know exactly where the story starts, where it ends, which little points I want to hit in between, and basically fill those in as we go. And I just pretty much set myself a schedule of, I want to finish this part by this date, this part by this date, this part by this date, and just sit down and write it. And it did not take as long as probably people would think, which is, again, because I'd pretty much already written this book in 500 installments over the previous 4 years. So it was just a matter of filling in some new things. Just probably 25% of the book. It's brand new stuff that I'd never, written anywhere before. And a lot of it is just kind of a repackaging of things I'd already written or already known, which hopefully, because I'd already written them, unless there's some super fans out there that have read every single word that I've written, there's still going to be lots of things in there that people don't know. So don't let that discourage anybody. But for me, it was things that I'd already, been through. So it was not as time consuming as it would have been with a different kind of project.
Yeah. I think that vantage point that you have, that close proximity, and being able to witness him and witness the team every day, gives it a more of an insider look, and not just this idea that I have to go and learn everything now, because obviously you're learning this day by day. And it reads that way too. I mean, it reads the way of, you have this really strong perspective into the story, and you've been watching this develop over the course of, 4 or 5 years. There's a lot of authority that comes with that writing, and there's a lot of deep understanding of him, of his place on the team, and his place in baseball too.
Well, thanks. I hope people get that. I felt another interesting thing as I was doing it is, um, there's things that when you go back and you read, they have a different impact than they did in the first place, because now you know what happens. And, there was, for example, in 2019, everybody talked about how, Ohtani's going to be such a great hitter because he's not going to have to worry about pitching. And that was an idea that we all had. Everybody talked about it, how look at what a great hitter he's going to be because he's not going to have to pitch. And it wasn't true. He was actually a worse hitter. And so then what we learned as we got to 2021 is that he needs to do both. And he's really better when he does both than if he's just trying to do one. And I think that's, an idea that we certainly didn't know in 2019 and we learned in 2021. And then as you go back and you read it, then, things make a little more sense.
How tough do you think it was for him when Tyler Skaggs passed away?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was hard for everybody, the whole team. That team really, it hit them hard. He was a very popular guy on the team. And I know it's people say that and, but it's not true. There's not every player on the team is like friends with everybody. That is just not the way it works. But Tyler Skaggs legitimately was, everybody liked him. Media liked him. Coaches liked him. Ballpark employees liked him. So when he died, it hit the team hard. And Shohei Ohtani had been like next to him in his locker was next to him in spring training. It was next to him in Angel Stadium. They had the same agent, so they spent some time together, away from the ballpark a little bit. So I think it was very difficult for him. I think that was just another reason that, the 2019 was a disappointing year for a lot of ways.
What do you think emotionally Shohei Ohtani's injury did for him in terms of his approach to the game, in terms of the way he looks at his career, in terms of the difficulty of sitting around and not playing when he wanted to play? How tough was that period for him?
Yeah, I mean, it was really hard because as we found out, he needs to do both. And when he's only doing one, it kind of makes him incomplete. And one of the other things that happened was in 2020, when he couldn't pitch again, they had him working out, at first base and in the outfield. And, there was a little bit of that, or some portion of that was just to prepare for maybe if he doesn't pitch again, let's see what he can do. But the other part of it was we just got to give this guy something to do, because if all he has to do is sit there in the batting cage and take a million swings, he's going to drive himself crazy, and it's not going to help him as a hitter or a person. So let's just give him something else to kind of fill his soul up as best we can. And I think that's what they were doing. And I think that's part of the story about that this guy needs all of what he's doing because that's what he wants to do.
What kind of editing insight and direction did your editor lend to you as you submit your draft and move through the publishing process?
Yeah, they were very helpful in kind of directing me to some of the interesting sidelights, there's little tangents in the book where we go off and we kind of provide context, with the Babe Ruth thing and the Negro Leagues thing.
Yeah.
And I think those were all, with their guidance as we kind of brainstormed, besides just this daily, here's what Ohtani did on all these days. Where else can we go to give the book some more weight, so to speak? So they helped provide those kind of little side trips.
As you were going through that editing process, was there anything that you had to cut that felt extremely difficult to let go?
Probably other authors are going to hate to hear this, but I really didn't cut anything. And I think the reason for that is because, like I said, I knew the whole story. I knew what the whole story should be before I started. So I kind of, paced myself to where I knew how much of this we can put, how much of this we can put, how much of this we can put to make it all fit. And so I didn't end up overestimating and putting everything in and then, oh my, now we've got like 20% too much. So I think I kind of paced it out pretty efficiently.
How does it feel now that you're at this point to be able to look back and see all of the work and all the time spent putting this together, and then to be able to hold the final product and see it in book form?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. Having never done this before, you know, the one of the coolest moments is when you open the box and there's your book, and you can hold it and you can turn it over and it's got weight to it and everything. And even still, now I write for basically a website. That's what newspapers are, they're websites. But every once in a while I pick up the actual print newspaper, and you see your name in print, it still just means a little more. It just feels cooler somehow still. So a book is just that times 100. So it's very cool. The day that I walk into a Barnes and Noble and I see it on the shelf, that's going to be really cool. I'm probably going to go spend a day just driving around to different Barnes and Nobles and look at it and put my book up in front of the other books so it gets sold. And I'm looking forward just to getting the response to it, to have reviews on Amazon and all these kinds of things. And hopefully they're good. But, and signing books. I've signed a couple just already of the advanced copies just for friends. And it's kind of weird, but I'm looking forward to doing all this just because I've never done it before.
It's interesting with the book coming out now because the forward is by Joe Maddon, who's no longer with the Angels.
Yes.
How interesting is it for you to look at the Angels and how that franchise has grown and transformed during Shohei's career? You talk about all the different managers he's had, all the different GMs he's had. It seems like there's so much change happening with that team over the course of 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of the side backstory or understory to this book is the Angels not being good. And so we've got this contrast. One of the chapters is called Blessed and Cursed, which is about how the Angels have, these generational amazing players, Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, but then all along underneath, just bad stuff keeps happening to them. So that's what we've kind of got right now. Even as the book is about to come out here in 2022, the Angels are not doing very well. And we're already hearing boy, the Angels got to get rid of Shohei Ohtani, or Shohei Ohtani deserves to go somewhere else because he should win and all this stuff. And so that's not a great backdrop for a book. It's kind of interesting though. And Joe Maddon just got fired. So obviously all of that stuff is a little awkward, but it does provide an interesting question, for kind of the discussion after the book, so to speak, about what's going to happen to Shohei Ohtani now. I personally think he's going to stay with the Angels. They like him and he likes them, and they're probably going to give him a lot of money, and that will, counteract the fact that he would prefer to win more, and they still could. But to answer your question, there's a lot of things have gone on with the Angels as Ohtani has been there, and it has provided kind of an interesting, backdrop for all this.
And building off of that point, one of the things that you wrote about and that really stood out to me was the Angels' effort to bring him on in the first place, where you have these other teams with deep pockets like the Yankees, who you expect to get a player like this, and he ends up really falling in love with the Angels. It was fascinating looking at that process and all the effort they went to in order to get him interested and provide the right fit for him coming stateside.
Yeah, that was really another part of the story that I think people don't know about, is how really unique it was for the process for him to pick the Angels. Because usually in baseball, when teams and players are matching up, there's one of two situations. One is where it's just a draft, so the player's got no choice. And the other is where it's a free agent situation. So basically the team that can offer the most money is going to get the guy. In this particular case, though, neither of those was true. And because of the different financial spending restrictions, and because of where Ohtani fit in the baseball definitions about what kind of player he was, pretty much all the teams had about the same amount they could spend on him, relatively speaking. It was all insignificant. But every team still had a chance to get him, unlike the draft. So basically they had to recruit him like you would with a college athlete. They had to convince him that this is the place you want to be. So that's not usually the way it works. Usually they put a dollar sign out there and go, here's how we're going to convince you. So I think the whole process of how the teams went about trying to convince Ohtani where he should sign is very unique and something that I think people will enjoy learning about.
As we, wind down on this, Cole, is there anything that I missed or anything that you want to talk about regarding the book that we haven't talked about yet?
No, I just think that the, probably half the book is about the 2021 season and the other half is about how we got there. And I think that the how we got there part is the part that a lot of people will find the most eye-opening because, excuse me, we heard a lot about him, in 2018 when he made a splash to the big leagues. And then I think a lot of people outside of just Angels fans might have lost track of what happened to him between then and 2021. So I think that the big roller coaster that he took from this great Rookie of the Year season and then 2021 great MVP season, a lot of up and down bad things happened in between. And I think that roller coaster will be interesting for people to go along.
Definitely. And the book is out when? What date is the book out?
July 12th.
July 12th. Awesome. Jeff, this has been such a pleasure talking to you, such a pleasure reading this book. It's an awesome book, and just wish you all the success as you, reach publication day and on forward.
All right. Well, thank you very much.